was a time in this country, a long time ago, when reading wasn't just for fags, and neither was writing. People wrote books and movies that had stories, so you cared whose ass it was and why it was farting, and I believe that time can come
Hello and
again.
welcome to the Think Political podcast. This is episode 55, and I am John Bolton's mustache. On this episode, we're going to have a special guest here, but before I get to our special guest, I will introduce some of our more regular guests. First, joining us, a name I'm sure everyone is familiar with at this point, Caitlin Cloven. Caitlin, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty great. Happy to be here for talk about the LP. And anyways, how are you?
I'm good. It's always our favorite topic.
Apparently, I've forgotten how to talk today.
It's okay. You'll have an hour to work on it. Also joining us is been a bit of a regular lately from the Shitlord Preachers podcast. That is Amos Joseph. I think Amos was muted. He should be back though. Amos, are you there, bud?
Oh yeah, I'm here. Also known as Gary Johnson's non-existent beard.
There you go. And you might have heard that as our special guest joining us on this episode is Perry Willis. Perry, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get into it, if I could ask you just for a moment to share with our listeners who you are and what you do.
Well, currently I am the vice president of the Downsize DC, which is a libertarian lobbying organization. We have had a few bills in Congress, one Subject to Time Act, Read the Bills Act. We also run an educational organization which promotes what we call the zero aggression principle. It's called the Zero Aggression Project. And in the past, I have been national director of the Libertarian Party twice. I've worked on 5 different presidential campaigns and run 2 of them, including Harry Brown's 2000 presidential campaign.
It's impressive. I like Brown. I like Brown a lot.
It's a good man. I miss him.
Yeah, he was he's one of those guys that had those quotes. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm sure, but he's always got those good quotes, like the quotes that make good like T-shirts, right?
Yes, he was very good at memorable things, and he had whole lists of sound bites that he used rigorously during the campaign. So he's very, very organized, very consistent in his message, and obviously a very successful writer. And so he was just a great candidate for us.
He really was. It'd be nice if we had more Browns these days. But I digress. So the reason we're having Perry on, not only is he obviously quite qualified to speak on libertarian topics, Perry did write an article on his website, which I urge everyone to go check out. You can find it it's going to be zeroaggressionproject.org. Just out of my curiosity, is there a reason you went with zero aggression instead of like non-aggression as it's normally?
Yeah, L. Neil Smith, science fiction writer, made an argument a couple decades ago that NAP is kind of a lazy-sounding acronym, and he suggested that ZAP was more vigorous sounding, and we agreed with him, so we chose that.
That's a good point. It is a little sleepy, like literally. Yeah. Okay. So
I don't know if that formulation will catch on, but it's the one we've decided to promote, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty cool. A zero aggression project, zero aggression principle. It's neat. It's new, different.
We have a sign off that we use at the bottom of all of our email newsletters that we send out. Zap the state and have a nice day.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I like it. So we have a little group, and one of Perry's articles was shared with the group, and we were having a bit of a discussion about it in the group. And I thought, it would be great to have Perry on, and we can talk about this a little bit. We'll just jump right into it here. So the name of the article is The Libertarian, and then we have quote unquote marketing myth, an open letter to the libertarian movement. And there's some stuff in here. Here, this stuff up top, we'll get to that later. I want to start by talking about the stuff I like. You broke down some, in my opinion, some really good what's the best word, like prescriptions here, really good advice, really good, things we can do moving forward. And if you don't mind, I'll give you the floor for a second. And if you wanted to break down some of those ideas, I think they're really good ideas, and I think the listeners could benefit from having heard them.
As long as I've been in the libertarian movement, I have advocated something I call discovery before persuasion. Not discovery instead of persuasion, but discovery before persuasion. I believe that we should make it our primary goal to find and activate people who already agree with us, rather than spending so much time trying to convince statists to become anti-statists. We should first find the people who already substantially agree with us and try to get them active first. I've always felt this, and I feel it even more today, where after 50 years of work, numerous studies show that we've got 30 million Americans who already self-identify as libertarian and another 30 million who hold mostly libertarian views. So given that that we've really, the movement as a whole has had this huge success that hasn't been harvested, because you're in the Libertarian Party, you know how few Libertarian Party activists there are. There's certainly not 30 million of them. Why aren't we going out and first trying to find all those people who self-identify and getting them active in the movement? So that's my first suggestion. It's been the thing I've always advocated, and today I see even more reason to advocate it because we've had so much success in moving the culture in our direction. So I have a feeling I may have dropped out here.
No, I'm listening.
Nope, you can hear me? I
yep.
just heard an echo.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you want me to ramble on, but if I had to reduce my own personal message to one thing, that would be it.
Right.
Focus on finding the people who agree with you.
No, I agree. That's very important. Kind of veer off a little bit. I think this is a related topic, so I want to kind of bring this in too. So I don't know if anyone listening is familiar with the name Project Archimedes. And if I'm not mistaken, Perry, this is something else that you're responsible for as well. And this in particular is something that has baffled my mind. So there's a statistic here. There's a Reason article that lays it out pretty well that was released in September of 2017, but it talks about this issue that's going on with the National Party having trouble retaining national dues paying memberships. And if I'm not mistaken, that was precisely what the task of Project Archimedes was to do, was to work on retention. If I'm, please keep me honest, and to bolster and keep dues paying members in the National Party. Well,
what I did when I was national director of the LP in the middle 90s was I looked at the number of donors that Dole and Clinton had, and I guess that was the 92 race. And it was 400,000 separate donors for each of them, roughly. And I thought that's the target we need to be going for. We need to have, if we want to, I think that the most persuasive thing that we could do for our message is not necessarily anything about the message itself, but rather simply to have visibility parity with our opponents, to have our message heard to the same level that their message is heard. And so one of the ways you could measure, you could quantify what that would take is we would need to have the same number of donors so we could fund the same amount of outreach. So that was 400,000 donors. And so Project Archimedes was aimed at using direct mail to try and get as many donors as we could. And the result of that was we reached record levels of membership. And, well, of course, we got nowhere near 400,000.
Right. But, for what the LP usually does, that was probably pretty good to have those numbers up there. And then
it was the highest ever before or since.
Really?
Yes.
So in this article I'm reading here, it says that the high was 18,908, and so you got higher than that with this effort.
Oh yeah, I don't know where they got that number from. One of the interesting things to me about when other people in the movement write about the Libertarian Party, they never seem to call anybody who actually knows anything about the subject. We got up to about 35,000.
Holy moly. That's incredible. Okay, so man, what a trip. Because we're talking about, on the heels of the Gary Johnson campaign, which should have been, a record number.
Yep.
And it sounds like your efforts, which didn't have a presidential candidate that a lot of people seem to like, kind of put those to shame.
Well, it must be said that we had 1996 Harry Brown campaign as kind of a starting point for us.
Right.
Although most of what we did was not gained through going after people who'd supported Harry during the 96 campaign. It was just going to various kinds of direct mail lists. But it definitely helped that we had Harry's first campaign as kind of a background to what we were doing. And Harry helped us with the fundraising for Project Archimedes. So that was also helpful. I want to go back to what you were saying about Gary Johnson, though.
Mm-hmm.
He got a record vote. But even if you go back and look at other presidential campaigns that didn't get record votes, it's the case that we have spent many years of effort and millions of dollars to get the votes that vanish on election day.
That's right.
And it has always seemed to me that what we ought to be doing, one of the things we ought to be doing, is we ought to have phone rooms that start the day after election day, and we ought to start calling through districts. We know how many people voted in a given precinct, and we can just call through the precinct until we find all the people who voted Libertarian in that district, and we put them in a database. And that becomes the floor for the next effort.
Right.
But we haven't done those sorts of things. We haven't even really thought to do them, apparently. So my partner, Jim Babka, and I, we want to change that. Going forward to the next year, we have projects underway. We're planning to change all of this. We're going to go out and find all the people who self-identify as Libertarian. We're going to find all of the people who hold mostly Libertarian views and put them in a database. And the next presidential race comes around, and the day after it, we're going to be calling all across the country, and we're going to find all the people who voted Libertarian.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think that I'll get into a little bit more about exactly why I wholeheartedly agree with those efforts. But yeah, I think that's great. I think that's what's missing a lot. I personally, my national membership has lapsed, I believe, at this point. And they've sent me some mail, some snail mail, and they've sent me a couple text messages, but nothing insane. But even then, that's more than was being done before. So there's a little bit of effort to be commended there. But let's get into the meat and potatoes here. I just wanted to make sure we shared a little bit of what you were doing there with everybody, because I think, like I said, it blows my mind that the Archimedes effort just went away. It really does. We didn't really touch on that. So that just one day that just stopped happening. What exactly happened there? I was
no longer there to push for it.
Okay.
And when I was the national director that particular period, having done the job before and had kind of suffered under micromanaging from the Libertarian National Committee, when I came back to do it again, I said, look, we need to do this entrepreneurially. I'm going to have the responsibility for achieving goals. I need to have a lot more of the authority, and you guys need to become much more advise and consent and that sort of approach. And the LNC went along with that for a good period of time. And that's what allowed us to do a lot of the things that we did. We were able to get entrepreneurial and make things happen in an entrepreneurial fashion. But the LNC increasingly they didn't like being on the sideline increasingly, especially as new members came on. And so what happened was, when I was no longer there as national director to push for the program, a lot of LNC members had their own ideas about what should be done, and there were kind of technocratic things like reserve policies and things of that nature. And so there was nobody to champion the project, and it died. And I think it's just the nature of the organization. It's a politically managed commons, that it's never going to be able to sustain a consistent entrepreneurial vision for very long. So the things that need to be done to make the Libertarian Party successful need to be done by outside efforts. And if you look at the Democrats and Republicans, this is precisely how they work. It's not the RNC and the DNC that make most of the things happen in those parties. It's all sorts of political consultants and fundraising organizations.
Yeah, see, I'm
right, and it's unfortunate that we don't have that infrastructure set up. So you said you had 35,000 new members or donors to the party with that project?
Donor members, yes.
Wow, that's incredible. So they didn't see the value in continuing that, or was it replaced with another project that also died? Or I'm confused as to why they wouldn't want to continue that if you had the best success ever with it.
Ego. Everybody thinks that the idea that they have in their head is the idea that should be pushed. And that's perfectly fine if you're pushing it as an entrepreneur and you're going out and raising capital to make your vision happen. But when 19 people are sitting in a room and they don't really have any skin in the game, and they're pushing their own visions, and the vision that's going to be adopted is determined by a majority vote, it's not going to be a good result usually. So it really was that everybody involved thought that their vision of where the party should go was going to be even better than Project Archimedes. So Project Archimedes wasn't important, even though it had succeeded, because the vision that they had was going to be even better. So it's the typical human psychology, I think.
Oh, God.
Me being involved in the party the last 2 years, that seems to be the continuing attitude that I've witnessed from the people that I've dealt with. I mean, I can't say it's party wide, but in my experience, that seems to be continuing. So
they're human beings, and you put human beings in a political situation. Again, it's a politically managed commons. We know as libertarians what happens to commons. They aren't treated well.
That's my issue with that's actually one of my biggest issues with the party is the structure itself, the way they break down, work and responsibilities. It's not set up to succeed, and it won't succeed until it's completely restructured from the ground up.
I kind of think outside the box on this now. I don't think the party needs to be reformed or improved. I think what's needed is infrastructure that will support the party needs to be built outside of the mechanism of the party. The party's actually done one really powerful, important thing, and that's batter down the ballot access laws. It's actually been pretty competent at that. And that's what attracts, whether you like them or not, that's what attracts people like Ron Paul and Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, is that we have ballot status. So if that's all the Libertarian Party ever did, but other organizations and entrepreneurial efforts came on the outside to discover who all the Libertarian voters are and to run campaigns, the Libertarian Party mechanism itself could go on being dysfunctional because it wouldn't matter. Because all the real work would be done entrepreneurially.
That's a really interesting idea, actually. Like I hadn't really thought about it. Like, the RNC and the DNC, they have all of these independent, corporations and conglomerates, doing all of that outside work. Like I have a friend who just worked a campaign for a Republican. He worked for a company that did campaigning. Like that's all they did. Mm-hmm. They had, different smaller companies they had bought up. It was a campaign conglomerate. And I never really kind of put two and two together that that's what the LNC should be doing instead of completely restructuring, using these outside corporations to do all the work for them. I really like that.
Yeah. The only thing I would say that kind of runs a little bit different than that is that the LNC should have nothing at all to do with it. The LNC what we need are entrepreneurs who are going to stand up and say, I'm going to go find the donors and the candidates, and I'm going to make stuff happen. And because the LNC as a political entity that sets together and deliberates is never going to be able to do any of this stuff.
Yeah, the Death by Committee, LNC. Yeah.
Yeah, we're lucky that they have been so good at ballot access. And I think that's enough. That's all they need to do. The rest of us need to think of how we can entrepreneurially do the things that need to be done that the LP as an institution is not capable of doing itself. And so I think one of the big ones, as I said earlier, is to find all the libertarians and put them in a database. But there are other things that need to be done. Find good people who are good at being candidates.
That's absolutely one. So do you think anyone would have been able to do the work that you did with Project Archimedes without, having the say of being in the party specifically? When you did the Project Archimedes, when you did that, sorry, I started that kind of funky. You were in a director position, correct?
Yes, national director. Yeah.
Yeah. To be able to do that, do you think you'd be able to make as much headway on a project like that without being in a director position in the party itself?
No. One of the reasons that I was able to succeed at the project was because I had a fabulous partner who was the chair of the LNC, Steve Dasbach, who rode herd and just was masterful in his management of the LNC, and had the same vision I did. And so you'd have to. This really was a special set of circumstances, and the fact that we had somebody like Harry Brown was another. It was just a confluence of special things that allowed that success to happen for that one brief moment. And I think it's a hard thing to repeat, because you got to have just the right people and just the right talents and just the right positions. But again, I don't think it's necessary, because none of the stuff that really needs to be done has to be done by the LNC or the national office. It can all be done outside of that institution.
Yeah, but it's just so damn difficult to do it without the resources, at least for reaching out to people. But yeah,
well,
go ahead.
The connectivity, gosh, if I'd had the connectivity we have now with the internet and Facebook and so forth in the middle 90s, what I was doing would have been so much easier than what it was. But even using the tools that we had then, which was primarily direct mail, that can still be done today. Now, if I could identify one thing, or call it two things, that I wish the LNC would do that would help things tremendously, I wish they would start allowing advertising in their newspaper again, and I wish they would start renting their mailing list again.
Right, like renting it out to
that
third
would
parties.
give entrepreneurs access to libertarian donors.
Right. Yeah.
They don't do those things anymore. They don't sell advertising in the newspaper, and they don't. There was all sorts of entrepreneurial activity in the Libertarian Party in the 90s because people could advertise their projects. Can't do that now. What
got it shut down? What was it? That's just the tide slowly turned that way to shutting that kind of stuff out.
LNC got convinced itself that the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law prohibited them from selling advertising and from renting their list. Now, I thought that interpretation of the law was wrong then, and I still think it's wrong now.
It's got to be wrong because the DNC and the RNC do it.
Exactly. So, but because there's very rarely ever been anybody there that had an entrepreneurial mindset, nobody ever thought to re-examine this question. And also there's probably some native natural desire to prevent competition with the LNC structure.
That's got to be right back to that ego thing, though, right? Like, why else would you not?
That's back to the ego thing.
Yeah, like why else would a libertarian be afraid of competition?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're human, just like everybody else.
I like how all these solutions that you've been offering and the things that have worked have all pretty much just been sort of just utilizing entrepreneurship and basically, capitalizing on capitalism. It's the very things that we really try to push for that are actually the things that we need to do to actually help the party become more successful. And
that's right. And you look at the LNC, the LNC is a politically managed thing, which is kind of the opposite of what we believe.
And somehow, and somehow
we've saddled ourselves
not following.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
a major thing that I've noticed within the Libertarian Party at almost every level, is the things that we advocate for with government. Like it's not applied in the same way. Like, I guess, with capitalism, for instance, you have your free market principles and stuff. We don't apply that within the LP. And then they're kind of selective about it too, because they say that, bottom up is the best way for governance, but they also try to run the LP bottom up, which doesn't work. But if you apply capitalistic principles, an organization should be run top down, and they don't do that. So it's like the things we preach about is not put in practice within the LP. And it's really, really frustrating. And I've seen it on every level, state, local, national. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, that we had, we've faced that bottom up, top down debate during my time too. And one of the ways we tried to address it was and this was Steve Dosbach, who was the real spearhead of this and made it happen, was we did unified membership and revenue sharing. And the result of that was a lot of parties, local parties, ended up having more membership and more funding than they'd ever had before. But of course that got jettisoned too, because, somebody's ego had a better idea.
So what kind of project was that? So you combined all state, local, and national memberships into one?
Yes.
Oh, God,
and one of the things that meant was all the members that we brought in through Project Archimedes immediately became members of the state and local, and they got part of the money that was coming in from the Project Archimedes memberships. It just flat out worked. And if you ever wanted to know in detail how to do this, to recreate it, Steve Dosbach is the guy to talk to, because this was really his thing from top to bottom. And
I'm going to write his name down, because I might get in touch with him, because that's a really, really good idea.
It's frustrating to hear this stuff, man.
We went, when I got there in 93, we had a budget of $800,000, and we had all sorts of problems. We didn't file FEC reports on time, and we had a $10,000 fine from the FEC. When I left 4 years later, we went from a budget of $800,000 to $3.6 million, and a couple years after that, because I did Project Archimedes largely not as the director but as a contractor. So the high point of the membership actually came after my director period.
Okay.
But we also created FEC filing software. We'd had to file our reports by hand before, and that's why we were always late and we were constantly getting fined. So we filed our reports right on time every month, and we did it electronically. So there was lots of really cool infrastructure stuff that happened during that period. But I don't know how they file their FEC reports today. I'd be surprised if that software is still functioning. I'd be curious to know.
Should be
how they handle that function.
Well, it's frustrating to hear this stuff. I've levied, and I do levy criticisms toward the party at times, and it's just frustrating to hear this kind of thing. It's like it's been they're moving backwards, right? I hear this kind of stuff that you're talking about. These all sound like really clever, intuitive, smart ways to go about doing things and do something different. And in these days, I don't feel like people are really willing to hear different ideas or to do things differently. And I think it has a lot to do with the ego thing that you're talking about. And I think that no one wants to hear that maybe there's something that'll work better than their idea.
People get on the LNC because they have ideas. If they didn't have ideas, they wouldn't go to the trouble of getting on the LNC. So it's natural that when they get there, they want to have their ideas executed. And I don't know how big the LNC now is. I think it was 19 people in my day. So that's 19 different sets of ideas that are and some of them may actually be good.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it's going to all be mediated through a political process. And the only reason that we were able to step outside of that for a period of 4 to 6 years was Steve Dossbach's leadership was essential, because he achieved consensus on the committee and gave me freedom to do a lot of stuff. I wouldn't even bother, frankly, with trying to recreate that special set of circumstances. If I were you guys, I would figure out what's the thing that needs to be done. Can it be done outside of the LP? How much capital does it need? Who might provide the capital? Go try to get the capital and make that thing happen outside of the structure of the LP.
I'm at a point.
That's kind of the way I've been going lately, is trying to find independent outside ways of getting things accomplished, because I can't keep investing my time in something that's going to fail over and over again.
It's a lot of drama. Being involved in the LNC and internal libertarian politics it's mainly about drama. And it's tiring. It's very tiring.
It really is, yes.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting to watch people go through it. I'm at this point pretty primarily dealing with brands that exist outside of the party, and I'm completely happy doing so. But watching people, I mean, look, there's a few, there's a small handful of some of my friends that are in positions where they have enough room to run in their state parties to where they're able to get a lot done and get a lot of effective work done, and they're pretty much rock stars with what they're doing. It's just unfortunate that room to run doesn't seem to exist on the LNC, and so it's just to kind of wrap it back up to where we came from when we started with this article that we were talking about. And I think this is good. I think this is good that we discussed this beforehand, because it kind of helps to illustrate my point a little bit. And I didn't even expect that. Exactly. So the title of the article itself, again, we'll go back to it, is the Libertarian Marketing Myth. Now, my issue, I guess, with that would be because I'll be honest, right? Like when I first read that, the first thing I thought was nonsense. Like libertarians absolutely have a marketing problem. And then I started reading it, and what I took from it when I read, aside from, like I said, I thought a lot of the advice was really good in there, but what I took from it is, if there was one thing I noticed, was that the message, the libertarian movement overall, doesn't have so much an advertising and promotional problem, but I really do think it has a marketing problem. Now, granted, I do come from the East Bay area here in California, right? Like I'm in this a little hub of technology that's popping off right now. So maybe I'm defining things a little bit differently. So if I'm going to define marketing, I would say that marketing is the process that involves design, creation, research, data mining about how to best align the idea of a product or a service with the target audience, right? Marketing helps define the product even more than the actual product does. So when we're talking about that, I would say that marketing involves research and analysis. This involves studying audience response and creating language and design that'll best influence that audience. Certain groups of consumers respond better to images and words and certain things than others. So slogans, mission statements that best communicate the message of the product are essential for marketing. And marketing, I feel, is very multi-touch as well. So marketing is customer service, retention, marketing is soup to nuts, right? Top to bottom. And I look at advertising and promotion as a facet of marketing, right? Something that exists under marketing. So my way of looking at it is that libertarian movement, in my opinion, marketing is failing. But I would say that the promotion and the advertising is going well. And I think the stuff that you touched on in that article, it in my personal opinion, falls more under promotion and advertising. And after talking to you, it even made my feelings on this stronger. The things that it lacks are the things that you're talking about that you did and aren't being done anymore. In my opinion, that's marketing, right? Like the retention, the project architect, that's marketing. Getting out there and getting people to sign up, finding creative ways to do things, replacing old structures, getting rid of inefficient things and replacing them with efficient things, and finding ways to make the machine run much, much smoother. But the problem is that, as we're kind of discussing, right, you can't really do that or it's, I mean, you can, right? But it's much more difficult without being in the positions to affect and influence those changes. Right. And so in my opinion, like that's the core of the problem right there. Like why it can't, like the party can't be good at marketing. I feel like libertarians are really, really good at spreading the libertarian message. Like if they're great at debating, you know, we're awesome at making good points that make people think and stuff.
You look at Facebook and you look at the memes that libertarians create, and they're just brilliant.
Brilliant. Absolutely
I look at the
brilliant
memes from the left and the right, and they just don't compare.
No.
We're just brilliant at it.
Yep. I agree completely. Yeah. So when it comes to the promoting and the advertising of libertarian ideas, I wholeheartedly agree with you. But when it comes to the marketing of a libertarian message, I don't think it is going as well. And I think that the National Party has a lot to do with why that is. And it sounds, now I have a little bit more in that, talking to someone who has as much experience as you do with it. It's shedding a little more light there. I mean, you know, in that article, you said like 30 million people identify as libertarian. I think that's a really good thing. I think that's like we're saying, it's a testament to sharing ideas and winning people's minds. And especially when you look at the fact that we only have 500,000 or so, might be less now.
Registered libertarians.
Right. Registered libertarians. Yeah. And then you've got, you know, Republicans and Democrats. I think Republicans are somewhere around the 30 millions. And then Democrats around 40 something, I believe.
Yep.
So you look at those numbers, and there's obviously a big deficit there. But then you also look at like some of these Gallup polls that come out, and there's a recent one that came out that said 34% of people think that the current parties sufficiently address what's needed for American politics. Now that leaves 61% of people that are polled feel that there's room for a third major party.
Yep.
Right. That in my opinion, that is a massive failure.
So one of what I hear that number, and there's a lot of stuff you said that I could comment on, but I'll just take that one thing you just said.
Please.
I look at that number, and what that tells me is it is completely a waste of time to devote any resources at all to persuading people who are regular Democratic and Republican primary voters, because they are not part of that 60 to 7% that's dissatisfied.
I agree.
It's all the other people that aren't regular establishment party primary voters that we ought to be focused on. But when you hear libertarians talk about marketing and messaging, they're constantly talking about what do we say to persuade statists?
Right.
What you should say is, see you later. I got other people to talk to.
Right. And you
shouldn't be talking to hardcore statists.
And it's a great point. You mentioned that in the article too, a little bit about like the Red Sox and the Yankees or something, right? Because I think people go on the news. I think people go on the news and they see, you know, it's like Trump versus David Hogg, you know, for lack of better markers.
The news media is our biggest enemy. Right. We should turn that shit off. I don't know if I can say shit on a podcast, absolutely, but we should turn it off.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It's our enemy's messaging system. And it's amazing to me how much it controls the libertarian mind. Because like a downsized DC, we get a bigger response if we talk about whatever the media is talking about.
Of course.
But almost always whatever the media is talking about is something that benefits the left and the right. And it's not the most important thing for libertarians. And we probably don't want to get off on that. We could have a whole show just about what our strategy should be with regard to the establishment news media.
No, totally.
But to get back to the article and what you were saying about the article, the title was meant to be provocative.
Okay. It worked.
So that's part of it.
Yeah.
In libertarian fashion.
Right.
And you do get readers in it. It's marketing.
Yeah.
But I think there are three aspects to this. There's messaging. Mm-hmm. There's the mechanics of marketing, which is a lot of what you're talking about. When you get an inquiry, do you send them an info pack? When somebody their membership is about to expire, do you write them and ask them to renew? That's the mechanics of marketing.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right that on the mechanics of marketing, the LP in particular has quite often been horrible.
Horrible.
the other aspect of marketing is targeting.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we tried to do with Project Archimedes is we did database overlays to see if there were any kinds of psychological or income or ethnic or any kind of combination of profiles that would allow us to more easily find somebody who was a natural libertarian.
That's fantastic.
And it completely flopped.
Really?
Yeah, none of the overlays had any value at all.
Okay.
And the other thing that I will report from Archimedes is that, if you go to direct marketing seminars, they'll tell you about test mailings and rollout mailings and so forth. And one of the things we found is that there was not a very strong correlation between the results we got from a test mailing and what we got from the rollout. It was highly variable. And this had a profound effect on my thinking because I've always been skeptical of social science because I think you cannot possibly in social science control for all the variables.
Correct.
And I think direct marketing or any kind of marketing is just a form of social science. You think you can control for the variables and you think you can get some sort of data signal that will allow you to consistently know what to do. But the fact is, every single day is a new day.
Yep. That's absolutely
They're hearing
right.
different things in the news. I mean, we go back to before we got on the show, we were talking about pipelines between organizations. And is there a pipeline between the alt-right and the LP? Well, populism is the thing of the moment.
Right.
So, and there's a thing of the moment almost every day that affects how somebody's going to respond to a bit of direct marketing. So I agree with you that we need to do the mechanics of marketing right. I don't think that the message and data targeting are very important, except to the extent that what you ought to be targeting is people who already agree with you.
I agree. I agree with you there. I think it's a pretty obvious point too. It seems like, when we go over the statistics, like we went over, 61% of people that are being polled feel that there's room for a major third party. Given that, it seems like trying to convert people who are already pretty solidly rooted in the foundations of other parties, that feels like you're just walking right past the low-hanging fruit to go climb some trees.
Exactly. Tilted a windmill.
Yeah.
We think what Jim Babka and I think, and this is what we're going to do starting in the new year, and I'd be happy to come back in the new year and talk to you about this more specifically.
I'd love it, yeah.
Is we think that the first step is as simple as calling people up on the phone and saying, do you consider yourself a member of the left, the right, or libertarian? And start out by finding all the people who will accept that word libertarian.
Yeah. And
well, you build a pretty big database just doing that.
It seems easy, but sometimes the easiest stuff can be the most effective, right? What was it? Occam's razor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second step would be find those people in that 61% you're talking about who have mostly libertarian views. Now, that's going to be more complicated because you got to ask them lots of questions about individual issues. But gosh, even that sounds better than what we've been doing. I mean, what have we done in every single presidential campaign? I did it in every single one that I worked on. We put our guy on the radio or on television to reach out to an untargeted audience and hope that somebody goes to our website or dials a telephone number. Well, what if instead of doing that, what if we started calling people and doing voter identification calls? That's what the RNC and the DNC do. Well, the Republicans and Democrats do. They do voter identification calls. And then they build a database from that, and then they do get out the vote calls.
Yeah.
At election day.
And they fucking bomb
That's
you
what we should be doing.
When Beto.
And that doesn't have to be done by the LNC or the Libertarian Party. It could be done by entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And it's
done by you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and going back to the data thing, I do like the point that you brought up about, hey, you guys tried something and it didn't necessarily work. And your response to that was, okay, that didn't work. I think that's great. I think it's great because you were open-minded enough to give something a shot I mean, you heard my response to it when you explained it before you explained the results. So that sounds awesome. And then that's how it goes. I mean, like I'm a marketing manager for my day job, and there's tons of things that we'll do, and we'll say, hey, wow, that sounds like it's great. It's going to work. It's going to push us over the hill. And then, results come back. And it turns out that was a terrible idea, and we're never going to do it again. But you try it, and that's the most important thing. But
here's the really perverse thing: is the thing that didn't work that you say you'll never do it again. If you did it 3 months from now, it'd probably work gangbusters.
It totally
because
could.
Every single day is a different marketing circumstance.
That's absolutely right. That is absolutely right. And so, talking about data and research and analysis, one of the things that I've noticed that really I take an issue with, and when we talk about entrepreneurial direction being more successful in these kind of situations, one of the things that I think that the Libertarian Party ignores a lot is feedback from the people inside the party. Right. Every single company, what's really, really doing well for people right now is reviews, feedback, hearing what people want, taking it and putting that feedback back into the product. Right. There's this site called Trustpilot. If you're listening, go ahead and look it up. It's this company that exists completely as a platform that allows companies to ask their customers to review them. That's all it is. It's just letting people tell companies what they think of their product. It's everywhere. Companies love it. It makes companies more successful. It gives customers like having a voice and talking to people about what they think of the product. And that feedback is very valuable for the company because it helps them shape the product to become more of what the customers want. That is not happening on any level with the Libertarian Party, at least in national. And it's in my opinion, it's egregious.
We had an infinite membership renewal process when I was national director, and it started 6 months before somebody was going to expire. And if we didn't get them renewed before they expired, the first thing we did the month after they were expired is we sent out a letter that said, we have clearly done something wrong. You don't value what we're doing, and it must be something that we're failing to do. And could you please tell us what it is?
That's great.
Not only will we get great feedback, we'd also get lots of renewals. One of the other things we did was the Democrats and Republicans primarily raise money through fear and anger. All their direct mail is about what the other evil thing the other people are doing and how we got to stop them. We didn't have any power because we didn't have anybody in Congress, so we couldn't do that. So what I introduced was what I call the plans and progress model of fundraising. All of our fundraising letters about here's the progress we've just had and here's what we plan to do next. So it was all internal strategy and tactics. And that too became part of our renewal process because anybody who had been an ex-member got these letters. And so they could see that we were making progress and a lot of them would contribute and renew. So this gets to the mechanical part of marketing that you're talking about, and that the LP does fail at too often.
Yeah, and again, and for anyone listening, a lot of my friends listen to this podcast, and they also are big fans of the LP. This is not coming from a place of where I'm standing on top of Mount Pius, wagging a finger. These are things that are frustrating because I want to see the movement succeed. I want to see the party succeed, and as you know, I mean, listen to Perry here. He's laying it down. This is 101 kind of stuff at Perry. It sounds like you obviously have a working knowledge of marketing. And with that, you're talking about stuff that is absolutely, it goes right with marketing. And, all the more reason why it's frustrating to see that it's missing from a party that should absolutely be capitalizing on, again, that statistic, 61% of people that are looking for a major third party.
I've gone through love-hate relationship with the LP over the years, and I'm currently back in love with it.
That's good.
Not because I think that it in and of itself can succeed, but because I think it's a vehicle that other outside forces can make succeed, and we need to have that vehicle there. And I think we can make the LP succeed without it ever becoming any better than it is now.
Really?
Because, yes, I think all of the things that need to be done can be done outside of the LP and will make the LP successful in spite of itself.
See, I actually disagree there. I do think that the one function of the LNC or the National Party should be marketing, like the mechanics of marketing, getting into the, data mining and making sure that they're advertising correctly, using their social media presences, using their digital presence to get the party's message out there. Because, there's a difference between the movement and the party, the movement being the general advertising aspect. And they're doing very well. Like you said, there's 30 million libertarians. That's enough.
And I think the movement as a whole is that, not just the LP. But yeah, the movement as a whole has been done very well. Yeah,
for sure. And that's the thing, though. Like, if the movement's doing so well, the party should be. So I agree with you. Taking away all of these responsibilities from the LNC is a good idea, but I do think that marketing should stay under the party, but it should have direct leadership there. It shouldn't be a 20% committee. I don't disagree
with that. If my message to anybody that's active on the LNC or wants to be, the lowest hanging fruit would be to focus on getting the mechanics of marketing correct.
Yep.
Exactly. And that's the one thing that they seem to not be able to get at all. They can't grasp it. They can't take feedback on it. They can't put any kind of systems or processes in place to make it work. They don't have a marketing department in the whole party.
I think a lot of that happens because people think that marketing means messaging.
Exactly.
So people want to control the specific wording that's used, and that's far less important than getting the frickin' mail in the mailbox.
Exactly. Deploying a coordinated email blast, just very simple things that people take for granted.
And as long as it got delivered, that would be better than not delivering something.
Well, so here's
and we work for independent media companies. We make a meme sometimes that reaches, 2 million people. Like it's pretty simple. Like, you don't have to say something super profound. Like, you just have to say the right thing at the right time, and it will reach millions of people. But they can't wrap their head around that. It's like you said, they conflate messaging and advertising and marketing and everything into one, when they need to focus on the mechanics of marketing and getting the message out there, and not what the message itself is.
Well, yeah, I almost think that the quantity of marketing you do is more important than the quality, because you're not going to be able to tell in advance which of 100 memes is going to be the one that takes off. But if you have 100 memes, you're more likely to have one of them take off. And so that's just pure mechanics. What's the mechanics of producing 100 memes and getting them out there? That's, if you want to focus on something at the level of the LNC, that's what you should focus on, not the messaging, but the mechanics.
Well, not only
get
that,
the stuff out.
And not only that, so if you can go back to it, right? So we go back to talking about, like, what do some of those mechanics involve? And we talk about research and analysis. So just kind of building off what you guys have said, let's say you take 100 of those memes and you send them out, right? I feel like what happens now is it's like you take 100 of them, you send them out, and everyone's like, great job. Everyone pat yourself on the back. We did it, and that's that. When in reality, it's like, okay, let's go back. Let's see which ones of those did best, try and figure out why it was. And now we have a little bit more information to take into the next 100. So hopefully,
and I would say, even because I think that the marketing situation, the marketing environment changes from day to day, I think even more important than that is when you put out a popular meme and you've all of a sudden got a lot more people following your thread, you should put out a message that asks them to join.
Yeah, while you have their attention. Sure. And well, there's another problem too, right? So when there's no quantification of success, I found that to be hard to come by, right? So when you talk about marketing, a lot of it, like for me, I'll think the first thing I like when people talk about like marketing campaigns, the first thing I think of is like a couple core topics, or not topics, but like just a couple core features, right? Which is like, specify a goal. What's a win to you? What's a win look like? How are you going to get the win? What's the campaign going to do? And how are you going to track it? So how are you going to find out how many wins you had? Right. Yep. And those yep. three things in and of themselves, I don't see getting done almost ever. Like, I'll ask people all the time that have roles in the LNC, like, okay, what are you guys doing? How are you doing it? And how are you tracking it? What's your win? Then no one knows what the win is.
The top three metrics for the LNC should be dues-paying members, dollars raised, and registered LP voters.
I agreed.
And then after that, there's other important ones like number of candidates and so forth. But those three are by far the most important.
Yep.
And I don't think that's not how a politically managed organization tends to think, because most of the people that are making the decisions don't have skin in the game.
That, and they're not experts on this stuff. And anyone can volunteer for these positions, and if they're liked enough, they'll get the position. And nobody has a resume that's
they don't have an owner. They don't have stock. They're not stock owners in the LP. They're not partners in the LP.
They're spending everyone else's money, so it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Which is the very thing that they condemn the government for.
Yeah, it's a little hypocritical there. But it really bothers me that they fail so hard at these things, but they can't take feedback.
That's the thing that really
my
really
biggest
gets
thing
under
with me
my
is
skin.
They don't have any. They don't have those benchmarks for success. Like you ask 5 different people, what does success look like? You kind of like what Vinny said, and you get 5 different answers. They'll try something and they don't evaluate their analytics. They don't evaluate how things did, and it's a real problem, especially when it comes to social media, because that's what I do. Like, I'm a social media consultant. I helped with the National Party's social media, and every single time I said something like, hey, this is an issue, let's try this instead, because this has worked for me in the past. Here's how you analyze the data after you are finished. And nobody analyzes the data. And then they make prescriptions based off of their own opinions, and they get nowhere.
That ego.
So I ended up distancing myself from that position, because every single thing I tried to implement was met with, well, that's not how we do it. That's never how we've done it. It's like, okay, but look where you're at. It really can't hurt to try something new from somebody who has the experience and can do this stuff. But yeah, it's really frustrating. You have all the people who think they're experts, but are not experts.
That's the thing. That's the thing that gets under my skin the most, and that's why I'm quick to point out when something's being done wrong. And like you said, Kay, when people are bad at feedback, some people will be quick to come back and say, oh, how dare you, and stuff like that. And it's like, look, at my job, and I don't know how their jobs go, but in my job, when someone's not doing something right, you get told that, but it doesn't mean that the person telling you that something was done wrong hates your guts, and they're trying to make fun of you, and they're trying to shame you, or they're trying to belittle you, right? It's because there is a stated metric of success, and if you're not meeting that metric of success, then that's just not a met success. Right? That doesn't mean I hate you. That doesn't mean I dislike anybody. It just means that you missed the mark. Right? And if you want to make the mark, like, there's things that we can do to do that. And there's no way, there's at no point is there any animosity being espoused. Like, I'm not mad at anybody. I'm not pissed off at anyone. I'm not trying to burn anything down. But when people go around, and especially these people, a lot of the people in the Libertarian Party and in the Liberty Movement want to go around and they talk about marketing and they talk about all this stuff like they know what it is. They clearly don't. They're clearly failing at it. And then they're going to sit there and tell people that try to give them advice that they have no room to speak, and that they treat them like they're being attacked. And all it does is make me want to get as far away from it as possible. So God bless you, Perry, for having all of the patience to sit and deal with this, and to say that you're in a position to where you're in love with the party again. I haven't been able to get back there myself. And it's for one of the reasons you were talking about. I reached out, I came out, look, I have these skills. I work in this industry that I work in. I've got a degree in marketing. I have a degree in design. I want to help out. I want to be able to put those skills to help with the party. I want to volunteer. And I was like, poo-pooed away. I'll go over there if I can do something, figure it out, find people and go help. I went and tried to find some more people. Then I was still energetic. Okay, this guy's telling me to go and look and find people. I'm going to try and go do that. Went and found people a little more local, and I told them what was going on and what I wanted to do and how motivated I was and what the skills I had were. And I got given a fucking Excel file. And it's like, here, go find some, help us finish this Excel file. What? Okay, and that's why I found myself working so much with independent organizations, because I can put these ideas to use and I don't have any friction. I don't have to deal with someone that thinks they have better ideas, and they're just going to tell me to sit down and be quiet because, you know, they got to finish an Excel file.
Yeah, I think that is the way forward. And I mean, that's what Jim and I are doing, and that's what you guys should do. And there are millions and millions of libertarians out there. The job one is to find them.
Yeah.
Not to persuade anybody, but to find the people.
It's kind of an untapped market. I haven't seen too many people on the LNC who are in top positions talking about, you know, the 60% of Americans who are either independent, not politically involved, or disenfranchised. It's 60%. Like,
all these
why
guys
going after them?
Do something else for a living.
Yeah.
This is a hobby.
Yeah.
For me, it's my profession. And
that's a major problem.
It is a major problem. But the major solution to the major problem is to go outside of the institution. The RNC and the DNC do not run the Republican and Democratic parties. The Republicans and Democratic parties are run by all the campaign consultancies and candidates. And it's the same for the LP. It's got to become the same for the LP. The
consultant thing is huge, right? That's something I'm in no place to speak. Maybe the LP is doing it. If they are, they need to find a new consultant or a new agency. But like, I always wondered, like, why not? Why stop pretending that you guys are marketing professionals? Why not go hire some professionals? Why not go hire some marketing professionals?
The LP cannot do this. I think that's the mistake.
They can't?
You have to do it.
Oh,
you're the professional. You should find a local spokesperson. You would say, this person would be a good candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go out and use our marketing talents to find donors and voters for this candidate.
Yeah.
You be the consultant.
Yeah. So I see what you mean.
The RNC doesn't hire consultants. All the Republican consultants. Let's give an example. Karl Rove went out and recruited George W. Bush to run for president. The RNC didn't do that. The RNC didn't fund George W. Bush to run for the nomination. Karl Rove went out and found the donors and then used the donors to find the voters that were going to get George W. Bush the nomination. And it's that way with every single candidate that gets elected, and always has been.
I guess we could have a whole nother podcast on why people don't feel that motivated to do those kind of things for the Libertarian Party then.
Well, they're attracted by the hierarchy. They think the LP must be run by the top institution of the LP, and the fact is, it's not, or it doesn't need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even run by the state and local parties either. Look at the RNC and the DNC. No one has less influence in those institutions than the members of the committees. They're the most unimportant people you can possibly imagine. It's people like Karl Rove, and who was Bill Clinton's guy? Oh gosh, I can't remember his name now. But there's always some campaign consultant that was the entrepreneur that made a particular politician successful. You guys have marketing talent. You can do the same thing. There are undiscovered libertarians all around you where you live.
The problem,
go find them.
Right, in our local areas. I guess the problem for me is I've tried. Maybe I need to try harder. I tried at the national level, and I was met with
But that's the LP institution again.
Right. Well, I was met with resistance there, and then I also tried at the local level, and
completely forget about the committees.
Yeah.
You know what I would do if I was going to start at the local level is I would get the registered libertarian list.
Mm-hmm.
Or any kind of local libertarian list I could, and I would say I'm gonna start having a happy hour at the bar here on this particular street once per week. If you're a libertarian, come join me. And I would start talking to them about the project of finding who all the dormant libertarians are in our district.
Yeah.
Right. That's a project I'm working on right now in Minnesota. Affiliate building. So we're trying to deploy tactics to find all of these libertarians, because we don't register for parties when we vote in Minnesota.
Yeah.
There's no party registration. So it's really, really hard to get that data. So we're trying to find all of the libertarians so we can start building county parties to start propping up local elections like city council, commissioner, stuff like that. But yeah, that's the most important thing you can do, like as a party member or somebody on a state board, is finding people and getting them together.
Here's how simple I think it is. I think you get some sort of local database of names and telephone numbers, and you have somebody that's in the movement already who has a real estate office with a bunch of vacant phones at night, and you get some volunteers and you go down and you set up the phones and you call people up and ask them, are you a liberal, a conservative, or a libertarian? And everybody that says libertarian, and it's going to be 1 out of 5 roughly, you put in your database.
Yeah.
I think it really is that simple.
There you have it. Okay. Well, we're a little over an hour. Perry, I feel like I could talk to you about multiple topics for hours on end. So maybe if you'd like, we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back.
We can go over some.
Enjoyed the conversation.
I did too. Very much. Very much. Amos, are you still alive over there, buddy?
Oh, I've been listening the whole time.
I haven't even. No, this was a great conversation. I didn't even get to use any of my sound clips today. Usually, I'm quick to try and find ways to use them, and I didn't even didn't even look to my soundboard once today.
You might as well drop one in just for the sake of it.
You are fake news.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm really glad we had this conversation. This cleared up a lot of issues I had with the article right off the bat, because I read it and I was immediately turned off because I'm passionate about this stuff. I got kind of angry,
His
like
headline
we have a
worked.
marketing problem. I got all up in arms, but I'm glad you clarified, because I actually do agree with you, like on 99% of what we talked about. Like, absolutely. Like, we have the movement itself doesn't have an advertising issue, but we do have a marketing. So I'm glad we clarified all this, and I'd love to have you back on in the future. I feel like I could also talk to you for hours. So
enjoy talking to all of you, and I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, maybe we can get Jim to join next time too. It sounds like you guys do a lot of work together, and I'm sure there's a lot that we could both learn from the both of you.
Sure, he'd be happy to do it too.
Cool. Well, let's set it up. All right. So before we go, let's remind everybody to go and all of our social media stuff. So if you listen and you're a fan of the podcast, at least do us a favor and leave us a review. Share the podcast with a friend. Word of mouth is the biggest way that we can get out there and get more people to listen. If you didn't hear our last episode on Race and IQ, you should go check it out. Go to our Spreaker page if you can. And Eric Dondario is leaving us quite a few comments. According to Eric, we need to have more alt-right people on the podcast. I'm just going to go ahead and let anyone know that's listening that's going to be a hard pass from me, dog. But it is pretty funny. If you can go on our Spreaker page, I'll leave a link to it in the show notes on this one if you want to go see Eric Dondario freak out and leave us a bunch of comments. And then it's funny because he starts out real nice. And like the more and more the conversation goes, he gets a little more mean until the end where he's like, fuck it, I turned it off. You guys are a bunch of leftists.
That was really cool to see the progression of that. He was so excited.
He was finally someone's talking about race and IQ. And it's like, you might want to go back to the Stefan Molyneux podcast, because this is not going to go in the direction.
I'm not smart enough to talk about race and IQ.
Oh, fuck. I don't know if I am either, but we had a discussion about it anyway. Anyhow, so, and don't forget to go check out Amos's podcast as well, Shitlord Preachers. Amos, do you want to take a second and talk? I know you guys are setting up a new Facebook page and stuff, so maybe you want to let listeners know where they can go to find that?
Yeah. Basically, you can look up Shitlord Preachers on YouTube as well as on Facebook. You can also follow me, Amos, at Amos Joe on Twitter. But we're still getting set up. Yeah, basically just check us out there. We will be on iTunes very soon, hopefully. We got to try to work around naming the podcast so that iTunes will allow. The word shitlord doesn't go so well, so we had to abbreviate it to SLP podcast.
There you go.
So And then we're not reformed shitlords, we're reformed meme lords. So we had to change all of that. So,
oh boy.
But
fair enough.
Hopefully get around that, platform of free speech, but don't use naughty words.
Yeah. Well, it's, you gotta iTunes.
Nothing wrong with America that a lot of X-Lax wouldn't solve.
That's true. All right, Perry, is there anything that you'd like to plug or anything you want to make the listeners aware of before we get out of here?
If you're not subscribed to Downsize DC or the Zero Aggression Project, I wish you would do both.
Yeah, and it's seconded. I've gone and checked that stuff out, and it's pretty good. I like what you guys are doing, and yeah, like we said, I'm excited to have.
It's about to get better in the new year.
All right, cool. Well, hey, let's let it get better, and then I'll check it out, and then we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about all the cool stuff you did.
Thank you much.
All right, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to everyone that has taken the time to listen to this episode, to our guests. Thank you very much for joining. And whether or not anybody likes it, we will probably be back again.